Welcome to Defending Our Health. Today we have one of America's premier technologists, Mark Stross, with us. We're going to talk about the impact of technology and social media on mental health. I'm here with my co host, Forrest Seeley. He's the Executive Director of Veterans for Child Rescue. My name is Kim Kelly. And Mark Stross, we are so happy to have you here with us and to unpack these different ways that social media can impact our physical and mental health. So, welcome, and would you please give the audience a brief overview of you and your work and what they should know about you as a technologist?
First of all, I love technology. So I want the audience to know Mark Stross loves technology. So the question I'm going to ask all of you today is how genned up are you on technology? And if you don't know what genned up means, well, I'm going to describe it to you right now. Do you have so much information inside your brain that has been fed to you by your mobile devices that you're angry, you're frustrated, you're excited, but you're completely motivated? Because you're dependent on the information that continues to come in on that beautiful mobile device. Because if you're one of the many, which is probably all of us, then you are genned up. So, first of all, I want to hear from the other hosts. Are they genned up? Are you guys genned up?
I am certainly am gemmed up, and I think every day I ask myself, why do they keep changing the functionality of your device? When you get used to where the buttons are, where the features are, that gens me up. It's like you get an update, and I'm always hesitant to do updates because it gens me up. It's like, hey, I just figured out how to do X, and now I have to figure it out again.
And what about you, Kim? You can't just sit there and smile and not tell us the truth here, the simmering dependency truth.
Well, I've worked in social media marketing for over 10 years. So, for sure, I've seen the evolution of it and its impact on society and the consumers as a lot of different aspects of our culture in many different ways. So, for sure, I don't think any of us are innocent when it comes to that addiction and that necessary relationship or that dependency that we have on technology. And of course, there's a lot of positives to that and a lot of ways that it makes us more efficient, but I've definitely seen a concerning impact, especially on young people, on the future generation. And I know that's a passion that we both really share. Before we even get into that, I want you to explain to the audience what genned up means because you explain it in your book, but I don't think everyone's familiar with that term.
So, gend up is an English expression, or at least I was exposed to it growing up in Europe. And gend up means is when you are so overly exposed to a topic that you become excited by it. And I thought that was so beautiful to define our social media dependency as really defining it as we have become genned up. And genned up is not necessarily a bad thing. You can be genned up on a positive thing. Let's say you love flowers and you go to social media and you see beautiful flowers and you're genned up about your passion towards flowers. But equally, you can be genned up because you're seeing pornography and you're genned up because your dopamine is so high in your body because you're seeing things that stimulate you. So you can be genned up in many different ways. And that's why I wrote a book, Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity, which actually has a split image on it. In fact, it's right here. And why did I split the image? I split the image because ultimately we, all of us, are a little bit torn between good and bad. I mean, if you think about it, we all probably use our devices too much, and we know we should be off of them. And what kind of role model are we sending to our kids with our own usage of our mobile devices? I mean, are we truly innocent, or are we a product of what the mobile devices have created in society, which is a genned up society, which is filled with information that's exciting to that individual, maybe not to society in general, but to that individual, because what they're looking at is what they like to look at. They're looking at their bias because social media is designed to excite you and to keep you using it. And the only way to use it is if social media feeds you stuff that you like to see. It's so wicked because it's so simple. Social media isn't bad. But when you ask something to feed you what you like, let's say like a perpetual ice cream machine, I think if you eat perpetual ice cream, you eventually will gain weight and it wouldn't be very healthy, right? But what happens when you're having a perpetual ice cream diet and social media, just everything you like? Do you think maybe at some point you might actually be out of touch with your friends?
Well, Mark, I can tell you there's an observation that I've noticed with what you just pointed out. If you look in the, say, the past 5 or 6 years, up until then, we never saw a grown adult at McDonald's or at the airport or being pulled over by a police officer having a total meltdown. They're having meltdowns over $5 cups of coffee being too hot, too cold, hamburgers that had tomatoes on them. They're at the airport, and these meltdowns are causing them to be arrested. It's and what I find interesting is that you have law enforcement in their face constantly repeating, if you continue this behavior, if you don't give me your license, if you don't step out of the car, if you don't obey a very simple command, I'm going to break that window and I'm going to put handcuffs on you. This is so illogical to me. And so, what you're talking about with the technology, I think is having such a major impact on people. They don't realize it. They get so angry or so amped up that they do not understand. They're almost flying. It's like it's like their brain's not working. They're just, it's almost like you can say, "Hey, I want you to walk off of that cliff," and they'll do it.
To the audience, I'm going to speak directly to you guys. When you're using your mobile device, your brain is not working. Your brain is being fed information that an algorithm that thousands of programs worked on, designed to make you become dependent on it so that you don't leave it. And therefore, you are all dependent on these devices that are feeding you information that only you like. And then most of us think that information is the truth. We go out into the world and we proclaim our truth only to find out most people don't believe our truth. That disappoints us severely. We get angry because our truth is not understood by everyone else. And that makes us feel very insecure, under-respected. And that makes people feel they don't have a voice and ultimately makes them angry, or some become very angry. And it's quite simple when you actually look at how we've arrived here. Now, to fix this is not so simple. We've slid into this almost in a coma because it's been delicious coma, hasn't it? That ice cream machine has been pumping out these gallons of ice cream, and we have splurged and we've enjoyed it, all of us. But there's a price, and we're about to pay that price because we have only had this technology since 2012. It's 2024. So technically, approximately 12 years, right? So 12 years of this, guys. Well, our first generation of children that have been raised with these algorithms will be graduating and going to college. And in the next 6 years, we're going to have our first generation of social media. That's insane because if I was to look at the statistics right now, and anyone hearing me tonight, please go and check all of this out for yourself. Do not trust me, Kim, or Forrest. Please don't trust us. You have to do your own research on this. If you find any research that shows you people are happier since 2012, I would be really interested in seeing it. And if you know of some, please drop it in links
Oof.
because all the research that I've seen coming out from Asia to Europe to America is that since social media has become so abundant around the world, happiness, people's ability to feel secure and respected has absolutely decayed. So we have this phenomena called truth decay. And right now, and this has been tracked since the 70s, we're in the worst portion of truth decay since it's been tracked. We, the people, don't trust the media. We don't trust the government. We don't trust anything. And now, because of social media, you don't trust people in your own house. This is fascinating. And I want everyone to really try this experiment out. This weekend, when you go out with your friends and you're out with your family, you should all go and check out your social media feeds. Really, you should go and check each other's feeds out. Hand each other's your phone and say, take a look at what I'm looking at. I guarantee you it's going to be an adventure for you all because you're going to discover that everyone's being fed a different set of media. Now, you might have crossovers, and you guys might have helped create the crossovers by sharing media to each other. But each one of you will have different feeds, and
Right.
you'll be following different people.
You know what's so ironic about the concept of social media? Its intent is to help us feel connected and to connect us to people even across the globe. But with the mental health crisis that's so prevalent in pretty much every country around the world, and people feel more isolated now than ever, more disconnected from humanity now than ever. So, technology in general, of course, has added to that, but specifically the concept of social media that is supposed to socialize us, it's artificially replaced the actual human social connection. You and I had a discussion one time, Mark, where we were relating the concept of social media to the concept of junk food, where when you're starving, when you're hungry, your body needs nourishment. So you have that symptom, which is hunger, but you have the ultimate need, which is nourishment. When we resort to social media to connect us or have social interactions, and if that's our only intake, we're essentially ingesting the junk food version of social interaction, which of course is not nourishing, it's not sustainable, and it leaves us feeling empty and, in this case, disconnected.
Absolutely. That's the funny part of this. Kim, you hit the mother lode, and this is something in the research that I've been doing as I've been doing the book. And people are asking me, "Am I writing my second book?" I think the answer is unequivocally yeah. I think it's going to end up happening because there's so many questions that have come up, and one of the questions that I think is so amazing is what is the real price of this in society now, 20 years in, when we suddenly realize that our kids lost the respect for their adults or their parents because social media has fed them their own social media feeds in which anything they did disrespected about their parents, they could find a narrative on social media that would okay most of the time the opinions of the kid. So if the kid, for example, said the parents are too harsh on their rules in the house, you could go to some psychiatrist that would say, parents are too hard on kids at home. So they'll be watching those social media feeds proving they're right. Mom and dad, you're monsters. You're keeping us at home. And this is what people have to appreciate. That could actually be true. There are parents that are monsters and use kids, but your parents might not be those monsters. And the problem you've got with social media is just because you have a cough, your lungs hurt, and you think you're dying doesn't mean you have cancer. You could have just torn the lining in your lungs. But if you go to social media and you go, my lungs hurt, I'm coughing, it can bring up 7 or 8 different things, and they could all be wrong. My point being is you cannot take information, and if you're not an expert in it, expect that you will be able to be qualified to know if the information you're being served is legitimate. And this is the problem. We are not pros at knowing what's legitimate. I want you guys to think about something because I just had my first grandkid 2 weeks ago, okay, delivered to me. Now, when you get this little bundle and you're holding the bundle, right? And you're looking at this little bundle, What are you looking for as a human being? You're waiting for that bundle to start to mimic your interactions with it, right? Because as soon as the baby mimics your facial reactions, my gosh, that is the biggest day for the parents and the grandparents. And of course, whoever gets, the first word, or the first, name, like Papa, of course, would be me. But that first name, and you're looking at the baby and you want them to mimic you. So the problem we have in society is kids used to mimic their parents. Today, kids mimic their devices.
So if you walk around the Stross household when Kathleen's not around, there's a video, there's an audio recording going, Papa, Papa, whatever the grandkids around. He sounds like he's throwing down the gauntlet to get his name in there first.
Oh, I play for keeps here, man. This is a funny story, just for fun. By the way, a little bit of my background, because by the way, hate always coming into one of these things. First thing you do is, here is my bio. I am a technologist and I've done 25 years in technology, and I'm a real badass in what I do, and you need to listen to me. No, we're not going to do that today. In fact, what I'm going to say to you is I have been so lucky to have the most amazing career for 25 years. And I have helped and start and create this incredible field of the LED video board and the stuff that you see in sports stadiums, from 360-degree video board all the way to Penn Station, the World Trade Center, to these huge deployments. And I'm involved in the software side of this and making it all work. So my adventure at being the CTO of ANC, and now if you see ANC in the background when you're watching a sporting event, we're in about 200 buildings. What you're going to see now is you're going to be aware that that stuff is all happening. But have you ever thought about this, that people are responsible now to keep the bad guys off those signs? That right now, when you see those signs in the public places, it is now my responsibility, first, to protect the sign, second, to put up the pretty picture. When I started 25 years ago, the only thing I cared about, because computers were so unpowerful, they didn't have the power to move the graphics. I was happy when I got my pretty picture up. I'm like, yeah. Oh, now, literally, guys, 9/11 occurred on my watch. And that's when, the all the buildings came down in Manhattan. And then I got, as a first, well, zero generation American, because I immigrated from England, I got to do the World Trade Center and put the visual video boards in there with my team at ANC. And the software that I invented was actually used and still is being used at the World Trade Center. Then we got Penn Station and Fulton train station. And then we got the whole DC subway system. And then we got these major deals. And guess what? Each one of them had in common: security. First thing I had to do with these deployments is secure them. So now, guys, when you get back to the metaphor of the baby, I secure my babies, which are these video boards. And that's why I believe that is killer tech in the most positive way. What we have done for America with these beautiful deployments, especially the World Trade Center, the Oculus that looks like a bird, and the marble, and how beautiful of a sight that is. I'm super proud. But I want everyone to know my struggle is every day we're fighting to keep it safe. And that is why when I'm asking you guys to take my information seriously, it's not because I decided I wanted to become a spokesperson for digital security and people. And the reason I call myself the American technologist is not out of pride. And the reason my colors are purple is because I am planning to take the red and the blue, the politics. I'm planning to merge everyone and have everyone start to dialogue. That's why purple, a blend. And we need to start dialoguing again, because it's not a matter of who's right or wrong. The truth is, with all of this technology, with AI around the corner, We have all the answers and the solutions. We just have to start working together. We actually have more answers and solutions than we realize. And the problem is we've been yelling at each other for so long, we've forgotten that technologies are getting better. The ability to fix some of our problems, the environment and other things that piss people off is actually now available to us. We just have to stop yelling at each other. And what's so tragic for me is I can come on the air or do this with you guys, and there will be someone in this audience today that will say, oh, another old white guy. He's probably a racist and he probably doesn't care. And he probably is just doing this because he's prideful and he wants to get famous. And I want you to know that saddens my heart because every day that I'm doing this, and Kim, who actually works with me very closely, knows this about me. There's not a day that I don't think about this mission that I'm on right now. And there's a side of me that wants to go to the bathroom and just puke because I know that every day I do this, I got to put a shield on and I have to step up to the plate. Every day that you do this and you take this mission on, and I'm certainly not a pro at it, and I'm certainly not trained to do this, you realize why you're doing it. And so why I'm telling you this so dramatically is I didn't do this because my day job is so cool that right now I could have just enjoyed my day job. So instead, why I'm doing this is so simple. Kim has brought me to audiences that ask me questions that I just grieve when I'm hearing what the questions are, which is usually we've lost our kids to social media. They don't respect us anymore. They've left the house. They lost their innocence. Why didn't I know? They lost their innocence. I can't regain their innocence. Guys, I mean, it's really sad. We, in a society today that in seconds, you give a kid a phone, the kid goes into their bedroom, and before you know it, they've been exposed to things that you could never, ever think about. And it's not what you think. It's not pictures or videos you have to worry about. It's when a human being says to a 12-year-old, hey, do you want to take a look at my private parts? When a human being engages with another human being, it always becomes real. There's nothing more titillating than having human interaction. And when you give these tools to young kids, what we forget is you're putting the world right in their hands and you're literally providing interactions from the outside world and you're handing those interactions, you're putting those interactions into their hands
Unfiltered.
unfiltered, and then we're a little surprised when their innocence is just swiped.
Well, I want to mention something. You know, you were talking about stop yelling at each other. And one thing that I've noticed in communication is a word that, Mark, go back to every year you're sitting in a staff meeting at corporate headquarters, and they're the president or the CEO always says, "What can we do to make this place better?" And there's always that one person that raises their hand, and I always pick on that person because they say we got to have better communication. And I'm sitting there thinking, if you read the 6 emails and the staff meetings, this, that, and the other, I don't think we could have said it. But my point is this: today, and I use my kids as an example. I've got 2 kids in college. I've got my oldest just got married. But what I noticed with my kids is when we would have a debate or a discussion, they would have something to say to dad or mom. And it would be this kind of this aggressive dialogue. You know, hey, I want to go to this concert and I want to stay out past curfew. Well, then we try to retort that. And it's almost like a military moment because they're not listening, they're reloading. It's like they give me the full salvo and I'm addressing one point after another. And what happens then is I may start in a linear fashion. Well, let's first talk about the concert that you're wanting to go to. Let's talk about the content of that concert that I don't really approve of. I haven't even gotten to the second or third point, and then all of a sudden they're firing again. Okay. And that's how, what I think what social media has, and if if you watch it in the news, social media has taught from news, it's taught from social media platforms. It's never to digest the data or the information that is being broadcast to you. Now, keep in mind what that also does, Mark, is it forces me, because now I feel like I'm in this contest of communication. Then I'm start to retort back with horrible, you know, my communication skills as an orator drop down. Now I'm just trying to get the information so you can respond, and then you're all of a sudden you're trying to respond. So when you watch some of these interactions, they're very illogical to me. I always joke about the British. I love to watch the British because they when they're civil, they seem to be able to have these debates where you can listen to what they have to say. There's a pause, and then there's a response. It's almost comical now when you watch that. But
Well, if you think about it, if you don't mind me
no,
just,
go ahead.
Forrest, I'm going, you actually, I loved it because you actually just, you actually went straight to where I was going to go with this, which is if you go to European schools, and if you go to Russian schools and Asian schools, this is really true. They all teach debate, all of them, because what you have to realize is in life, you have to learn how to debate from a weak position and lose. And you have to learn how to make a weak position as good of a position as you possibly can if you really want to do well in life. So, American students, and this is so interesting, we have gladiator sports, American football, which is always win or lose. We then have all of our sports is predicated on win or lose. We have wars and drugs, again, implying win and lose on the war on drugs. We have war on education, war on everything. We have a mentality of black and white. But what we've stripped out of American education from literally from in the 19th century is this whole art of debate. And what in English schools is you have a debate class and you're given different platforms. You're given sometimes popular platforms, and sometimes you're given a platform that you hate, and you have to defend a platform that you personally hate. But there's nothing better than actually winning an argument on a point that you hate because you've had to live in a narrative of information you don't respect. But when you start living in a different reality and you're living with the other reality, you automatically become more tolerant. This is so funny, phenomenal for me because the young generation talks about tolerance, but as soon as you ask them to be tolerant towards your ideas that are different from theirs, they have no tolerance. Well, the truth is, we have stripped debate out of American education, and we seem to just like black and white. This is either good or this is bad. I'm going to say this to every Republican out there. Your stuff stinks. Every Democrat out there, your stuff stinks. I mean, come on, guys. You're both sides. There's no such thing as perfect parties today. And we could debate all day long what's both sides have done to each other. But can I ask one weird question to any Democrat that's out there that suddenly thinks Mark's a Republican, so I'm going to come after him, right? And if that was your first inclination when I brought politics in, I'm going to look at you and go, I used to be, but guess what? I denounced politics because you guys are too important to me. I realized if politics was going to stop me from messaging to you, then I'm going to stop talking about politics. And more importantly, I'm really going to go after both parties now because this is what both parties have done. Instead of worrying about our country, about taking care of the things that are super important, instead, they are taking care of their power base, getting elected, and making sure they stay elected. And they really don't care about the problems. So, for example, and I'm an older guy, Social Security is about to go completely bust. Now, this is the only problem with that. It's been going bust for my whole 50 years plus of life. I'm 61, but it's been going bust since Reagan. It's been going bust every single year of my life. It has never been resolved. So if you're a young person or a Democrat, hey, you've had more of the power than the Republicans. Why haven't your side done it? Oh, and by the way, Republicans, you've had sweeping majorities. Why haven't you done it? Oh,
Right.
if you fix these problems,
Yeah, it's interesting how divided we've become and how polarizing that can be, not only for the sake of solutions, but for people's interactions. So I know there's a lot of ways that we're all impacted. And for sure, we can all recognize there are many positive aspects of social media, not only with truly staying connected to people overseas or in different parts of the world, but also, for example, small businesses having a platform where they can promote their products and services. So just, for the avoidance of doubt, no one here is against technology or social media. Mark Stross is one of the premier technologists in America or possibly the world. But what we're focusing on today is the impact of social media, specifically the negative impacts that it can have on mental health as well as physical health. So, Mark, what are some of the most common or concerning ways that social media has a negative impact on our mental health?
wow, that is such a big topic. So, first of all, social media strips you of your personal respect for yourself. It it erodes your ability to have perspective. Let me make my point. If you today want to know about any star, any movie star, you can go to social media and YouTube and you can find pro and con videos on that star. You can find out their net worth. You can find out everything they've done bad and good with their lives. And there's absolutely no privacy. That person's completely in a glass house. So the problem, though, is with all of that is now you can compare yourself to that person. And what we now do, and we all do this, is social media has now allowed us all to become dependent on seeing ourselves against what we're judging ourselves with, which is usually other people. And when you constantly are putting yourselves on this scale, you tend not to be happy because you're looking at yourself as, am I good enough? And social media, unfortunately, has stripped people of initiative because then you go, well, if I'm not going to be that movie star and I'll never get those breaks, then why try? So more people are actually giving up. It's so ironic, getting angry. They might be the people that are actually, commenting negatively on a lot of social media posts because they've given up trying to become something great themselves. So now they become a social critic. And that, of course, feeds the whole narrative of how social media starts to perpetuate itself. And then those people start to feel better about themselves, making negative comments about people they don't like. And then other people comment and gives those people that have just made a negative comment a comment, and it creates a dopamine hit for both sides. So the commenter and the commentee both get a dopamine hit. And before you know it, everyone is enjoying actually commenting against each other because actually it raises dopamine.
Right.
When you think about it in that way, gee, go
Right.
ahead.
You talk a lot about the concept of funnels and how people can be essentially an echo chamber. So even from the public perception, where let's take, if a post on social media has a million comments and a million views and a million likes or whatever, obviously we know that doesn't represent the majority of society. But because people see those numbers, they tend to think everybody's talking about this, everybody feels this way, everybody's saying this on the internet, and it creates a very interesting echo chamber. So then the people who do have, let's say, the courage to comment and actually interact with their ideas, again, you're funneling people into a very interesting echo chamber that are basically, like you said, creating these dopamine responses where people are able to hide behind their keyboard and have a debate with people. But it's not the same as a human interaction where you have the back and forth and you have the human empathy for who you're speaking to and a goal to understand and come to solutions. You have time to think, you have time to craft your response and sleep on it and be angry and talk to other people and research. So it creates almost like an artificial dialogue, which again tends to separate people, but also divide them if that's the purpose of that conversation. People are not necessarily there for solutions, they're there to argue and hide behind their artificial keyboard.
Kim, that's a great point. Mark, let me hop in here. What I find it does, it makes us lazy. And I'm going to give you an example. Okay. When you get it's almost as if the media, the social media and the media world, they're trying to be the first out of the gate with whatever story they're trying to put out there.
Yeah.
And we've gotten to a point where oftentimes the first version is not the actual version. But what it does is it conditions us not to process information. And Kim, especially you and I, because we work so close together, we process information and we may have an opinion or a belief today about something, and 3 months later, 6 months later, it may change several times. And it's because we've digested the information, number one, we've received additional information. And all the time there's a lot of illogicalness that's happening with the story. And that's the thing that I think people are struggling with. And here, Mark, people are now making these claims. Is it your truth or my truth? Which is very confusing to me. Truth is truth. Well, what is truth? Well, if I punch you in the face, it's going to hurt. That to me is truth.
Right.
That's a very simple litmus test of truth. But now we've gotten to the point where people, they're not afraid to be punched in the face because they don't think it's going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt because they don't truly understand what that means. So there's a lot of confusion. And so what I hear you saying is that we need to slow down. We need to digest information and don't be afraid of finding out something that is going to be the opposite of what you feel.
Absolutely. I mean, we literally, so weird, but we become superheroes in our mind when we're confronted in reality by an individual. Let's just pretend um, I'm having words with Kim over an issue. Let's just pretend, okay, let's really go after it.
Dogs versus
Make it
cats.
controversial. Abortion. So I'm going
Okay.
after Kim on abortion, right? And we're on two different spectrums of this, right? So now I suddenly meet Kim. I don't think I could, if I met Kim, because I know Kim very well and I know her attitude towards things, I don't
She's
think
kind
I
of
could
cool. She's kind of
actually
cool.
perpetuate in person my argument with her. Oh, I could do it behind a keyboard, but if I actually was in front of Kim, I would crumble because it wouldn't be worth it. I'd see her smile, especially when would mock me and go, "Why are you so amped up?" Hey, you don't have to get so amped up about stuff, you know? Life's not so hard. I mean, but this is my point. You don't realize that what you are experiencing in your mobile device is completely artificial until you're confronted with reality. So when you're confronted with reality, you don't have the facts. So when you suddenly say these are my facts, what you're really saying is I'm too lazy to really explore the real facts because I've got a real terrible fact to offer you all. Real information, real facts hurt. Real facts are not convenient. Real facts tend to be neutral. In other words, they don't tend to amp up our side or another side. In fact, most facts, if you look at both political parties, go straight down the middle. If you look at where everything really ends up. And this is what's so funny. We're so extreme in this country, black and white. And yet the truth is, we all agree with each other. The differences between American people is so small for the echo chamber and the amount of hate. It's actually startling. I mean, are you kidding me? The abortion issue and the border issue we have the Democrats and Republicans running on two issues right now. And then they're also running on who's the better American. Is 50% of the Americans hooligans because they're mega, or are they good people? So we're basically saying, is 50% of the country good or bad? Now, how did we get here? Elections weren't supposed to divide us. Elections were supposed to be something that we did because we wanted to elect a better management to manage the country. But now it's like we're now we're actually electing now our daddy.
The interesting thing about a lot of people's bias, for example, with politics, but this applies to a lot, is that there's the inherent assumption that if they see you, for example, talking about a certain topic, many people will automatically assume that just because A, therefore X, Y, and Z. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm allowed to, for example, want our country to be protected and also care about the humans, the Mexicans and the Americans and everyone on every side. I'm allowed to actually have a holistic perspective about this, and you're allowed to have your opinion. But just because I think A does not mean X, Y, and Z, and it definitely doesn't put us necessarily at odds. So I enjoy having dialogue and discussions with people who disagree, as long as they're willing to explain their opinion and even maybe back up or give basis as to why they think a certain way, and certainly why they're accusing me of thinking a certain way without understanding, right? But what's interesting is that, to the topic of, we're fed so much information in social media and technology that we don't necessarily dissect. A lot of people have a lot of passion about a topic they may even be attacking you with in some regards. But when you ask them to unpack that for you, you'll find it's a lot of emotion, but not always a lot of factual basis, or even, again, I'm willing to agree to disagree with people, but if you're so emotional and you come at me attacking certain topics, especially things that are things I consider very important, for example, advocating about child trafficking in America, you're allowed to be, let's say, disagree with me about certain things. But if you assume that because I care about that, therefore I am of a certain political affiliation and I automatically must worship certain Lord and Savior political people, that's incorrect. But it's also so incredibly divisive. It can remove people from acknowledging certain topics because they think it's a political talking point. So, for example, children being trafficked in America, that is absolutely not a political talking point. That is an objective truth. You can disagree. That doesn't make it untrue. Now, if you don't have lived experience, if you don't have tangible knowledge, if you're mad because the screens you watch told you that something is true or not true, that's a dangerous frame of mind that can, to your point, divide and disunite us, and divided we fall. And that's when it becomes dangerous.
That's a really important thing that you just said, Kim. First of all, the downfall of society is that we can't have uncomfortable decisions. We're quit communicating. They say a marriage ends when the two quit communicating. And Kim, you and I know, and what's funny is we have a lot of uncomfortable conversations because of the world we live in and the work that we do. But in every day, when we have these conversations, we're still trying to digest what is the truth, what is the true truth. And I'll give you a great example. The numbers that we know it's huge, we know it's at industrial scale, but these traffickers and these enterprises are not filing tax returns. So some of the numbers that we're getting are hard to swallow. So what happens then too that we see is if you have somebody that was in that space, they were a survivor. Occasionally you might run into somebody that may misrepresent their story. They may embellish it. And when people hear that, then all of a sudden they say, well, it's not happening. They go completely opposite. But you and I and Mark is learning in our world, we take things with a grain of salt. Okay. We listen. We understand that was trauma and they may have embellished their story. And I'm not going to challenge them to the point where I alienate them. I'm going to try to take what information that I need to use from them, what I can learn from, because everybody's different experience is different. And that's kind of what I think what we're saying is we've lost that with the technology, that we've learned not to listen. We've learned not to communicate. Okay. I tell people all the time, I struggle sometimes trying to get an idea. I mean, Kim and I work together, so we were always coming up with programs and thing, topics for the show and this, that, and the other. And this idea may be bouncing in my brain for months. And so now I've got to tell her in 30 seconds what I've been thinking about. And it comes out of my mouth and she's looking at me like, that may have been logical to you, but I have no idea what you're saying. So then I have to think, okay, let me.
All of your wisdom. That's what my face is saying.
But my point is going back to communication, and Mark, you touched on the disruptor, and I'm touching on the result, and that is we're not good at listening. There's stuff coming out of our mouths, and there's information going into our ears, but they're the receptacles, not the processor. And you're talking about how the processor is being shut down by technology.
That's right. Just one second. Technology deal.
Did you? Yeah, I think you took a wrong swig on your water there. In the meantime,
yeah, one second. I will return.
I think I overwhelmed
yes,
him with my poor communication. His brain started smoking.
Well, I do want to talk about
no, just allergies.
In addition to this, because there's so much to talk about with communication and being divided, etc. I want to also talk about some strategies for maintaining a healthy relationship with technology and social media. So I'll let you have the floor, Mark.
Yeah. So what you just discussed is how excited people got with their information, and that they have now become truly imprisoned by their sense of entitlement that their information is right. And they're imprisoned by their entitlement, because what is so funny is that if you actually drill into um, many people's issues, you realize that, first of all, they don't have any understanding of history, and that usually someone has actually fed them a bold lie that begins the whole premise of what they believe. And usually the lie is always an exaggeration. So, for example, I love this one, is women's rights. And I just sat with a gorgeous individual on a plane ride, and we started getting into a discussion. And it started with her basically dissing me for saying, well, a guy at your age wouldn't understand what I believe in. And when she said that to me, I immediately go, you don't get away with that. We rumble on that one. What do you mean? And so it came down with that she felt that I was totally insensitive to women's rights. And then we rumbled into how I grew up. And since my parents were actually very prolific in working with sexual freedom and women's rights, and you can look them both up. My mom was the British actress Anne Haywood, and my father was the British film producer Raymond Stross, and they made very controversial movies. So what's so funny is these people fall into this trap of thinking I don't know what the sexual revolution is about. And then we can start going back in history. And what's funny is this individual said, well, IBM in the 50s basically clamped down on women's rights and basically destroyed women's rights. And it all was in the 50s and the 60s. And you guys didn't, and it's your generation that really screwed things up. And I went, well, that's really interesting. I said, because frankly, if you're not aware of this, there was two huge issues that occurred, and the culture of IBM occurred because of these two big issues. And she goes, what are the issues? I said, two world wars. And in World War, regardless if you like it or not, women are considered vital to a country's ability to repopulate. And regardless of how many rights you think you have or you don't have, if I'm in charge of that country, I'm making sure that I can repopulate after the war. So I'm not sending all my women to the front line. Sorry, not doing that. That is a really dumb idea. Number two, which is so interesting about this, is that then I said, but you're forgetting something. Prior to World War I, the Roaring 20s, women had the most amount of rights because of the suffragettes that actually fought for their rights that women had ever had. And then World War I and II came, and new ideas were brought in to protect the woman. We put the women into factories so they would stay home, and we tried not to have them go to the front lines. Some did, but only a percentage, because we had to make sure we could repopulate. And then I look at this individual and I said, so what's wrong with that? What is wrong with that societal issue? And it's true, IBM definitely wanted to make the men, when they came back from World War II, feel wanted as in heroes. So maybe they overcompensated, but what did you want those men to feel like when they came back from World War II? So it's so easy for people to say how effed up I is. But until you've lived World War II, until you've lived what America went through at that period in time, you really do not have a right to conflict that to today and say today is that and that is today. It isn't. The reasons for that were completely different than the reasons we today are arguing. We're arguing today over social media and mobile being able to feed us the world's information without filter and designed and also has algorithms designed to make us stay on those devices. That's what we're dealing with today. That has nothing to do with World War I and II. Now, I'm making this is such an important point. Before you go on a soapbox and start proclaiming how bad people are, then what good was all my parents' efforts to make the first movies that they had to go to the Supreme Court to have the movies shown in the United States? What good would those efforts have been if we're going to dismiss them based on standards today? This is insane. Because when my parents did what they did, they were fighting like heck for people to have the right to see their movies.
Right.
So,
And social media gives us a very out of context view sometimes, where we only see a short clip or we only see a headline or we only see our funnel's version of that context. And people tend to formulate an entire opinion based on that snapshot they may see and not understand that there's a lot more history to it. There are a lot of other representations within that. And if you look at that information with a preconceived bias, you are likely to take offense or to just put it off because it disagrees with your narrative, rather than the
right.
quest to understand, the quest to dissect, the quest to determine whether or not it's even factual. Because there's an entirely additional dynamic of not all news is factual. It's not required to be. Journalism is no longer reporting facts. It's often reporting opinions. But because they're on these prestigious sites or papers, people still consider that factual. So it can skew our perspectives, and obviously all the way down to our human interactions, where we assume a lot about information and people and their opinions without taking the time to really research and understand where that opinion is coming from, whether that is the complete opinion or a snapshot of it, and also all the different layers and dynamics that contribute to it. So, lots to talk about there with our perception of reality and how social media sometimes skews that. And I want to talk about, well, I want to hear from you, Mark. You have a lot of amazing strategies and even concepts about people's personal responsibility and healthy ways to develop a healthy relationship with technology, setting boundaries, and things that apply to pretty much all of us who use these devices. So, what are some of those strategies that you recommend and that we can unpack further?
Well, the first one is moderation, and moderation is something that we all probably will at some point in our life fight, and that is, having moderation. Will it be over sweets, candy? Will it be over soft drinks? Will it be over um, literally addiction? Whatever it is, how do we moderate ourselves when we have bad habits? In America today, it is estimated that most people use social media around 4 hours a day. Now, If any of you struggling financially right now, and I'm wondering if you could get a side business going, you could probably do your side business in that same period that you're working with social media. Now, before you come after me and go, it's so easy for you to say that, it's easy for you. Well, I wrote a book. I've been a chief technology officer, and I've been a dad, and I've also dealt with a huge illness when I was writing the book. And um, yeah, I had a lot of time constraints and I had a lot of issues going on, and it's not easy. But one thing I was aware that if I restricted my social media down to research time and said I have half an hour a day to enjoy myself, which was when I was having eggs in the morning, and I really enjoy that time, then the rest of the day, until I am finished with the to-do list, there's no other social media. So that means I had to be, and this is the tough one, I had to be disciplined and not give in to my desire to get that dopamine hit during the day. And let's face it, guys, the desire to get a fix or like a YouTube video or a little Instagram action or some TikTok, it really is an addiction. You feel drawn to it. So the first thing I want you all to think about is how do you moderate your exposure to social media so you create more time in your schedule? I think that's the first step you can do tomorrow. Oh, in fact, right now. Right now, you're watching us. That is a healthy deal. I have to justify that somehow. So that's a healthy deal. But when you're done watching us, consider that your half hour because this is like more than half hour. So consider you have now done like 4 days worth of social media. Now you're going to think I'm draconian on this, but again, want you guys to think about this. 2 hours a day applied to something can build something. 4 hours a day. Gee, you can do so much with 4 hours a day. You know, if you're a piano player and you were to play the piano 4 hours a day in practice, you would end up as a concert pianist. If you were to, if you're a drone pilot and you practice 4 hours a day, you'd become so experienced, you could probably make good money flying drones. What I'm saying is, everything in life takes practice. And what we seem to practice the most is how to use our mobile phones. I think we can do better.
I love that. I work in social media marketing, as y'all know, and it can be very difficult to maintain that concentration when I log onto a social media platform to do something for one of my clients. There's so many distractions, and those are there on purpose. And as you know, the algorithm is designed to delight me and to distract me with things I find interesting and educational. So I personally, on my personal feeds, I don't see predatory content, but I see things that relate or that, oh, my client could use this or we could do research. So there's still distractions. What I've implemented, in addition to the concept of moderating my own use of social media and making sure to really stay focused when I'm there to do something, right? That's a whole thing. But there are different apps and time limits you can set, even on the iPhone, for example. You can select different apps and select a time limit for them. So, for example, again, I'm using these apps for work, but just because of the human tendency to be distracted, I have time limits set on those apps. So if I do get, for example, a 15-minute time limit, that should be enough for me to do what I need to do in that moment on that app. If I find myself distracted, which can happen because we're all human, that time limit will come up and say, and I have the ability to reset it if I'm not done with my work. But it's a good reminder to sort of snap back into what I was supposed to be doing, right? So I find that safeguards like that can be very helpful. And I know there's a lot of apps and technology that can help people with that. I have other friends, college students, for example, that have even blocked certain websites from their devices. Facebook or whatever social media is their main addiction, they actually can block that from their device. So I'm sure you have a lot of recommendations, Mark, from the technologist
I
perspective.
do. So this is going to be this is a hard piece of advice for you guys. Anytime I have to suggest an app for you to use to be a replacement for your willpower is a failure of you stepping up. So let me say this again. I could recommend that you could have a reminder app that tells you, do not use social media. But you already know that. Why are you using social media? Why are you messing up your future by um, wasting your present time by doing something that will not garner you any more money or fame or do anything positive for your life? Why are you giving these social media companies your time, which is the most valuable thing you have as a human being? Why? Why do you not have the willpower to stop using the device? To me, you have to deal with that issue. So do not use the excuse, I don't have the app or I need an app to stop. No, you have to figure out what in your brain is bringing you back to the well over and over again. And you keep having, well, you keep taking huge buckets of social media from the well, and you keep doing things that harm yourself, and you know you're harming yourself. So we're dealing with, at this point, dependency. You notice I'm not using the term addiction. I believe most people, when you start to realize how much your time is worth, and if you start to put that time down into dollars and cents, it starts to equate to something that will make you stop using social media. So for me, when I realized how much time I'm wasting each day in social media, that amount of money was staggering. And when I actually did that, I made me realize the value of my time. And then that allowed me to stop using my time stupidly. So you have to create a value for your time. And that's my advice. So once you create the value for your time, then you go and every phone can monitor your app usage. Then go and look at the apps and then calculate the amount of salary you've wasted by being in those apps. And at the end of the month, tally it up and show your dopamine dependent brain the results of how much money you lost. Yeah.
That's an interesting way to look at it, Mark. There's a couple other things I would like to add to that. First of all, I find that it helped me because you get on Facebook. I'm gonna pick on Facebook. You get on there for 30 minutes, and when you're done, you're like, I just wasted 30 minutes, and I didn't get anything out of it. Okay, it's like the other thing that I find that these products do is they remove your patience. And this is important to understand, okay? Because you're looking for instant gratification. In our kids, it's very apparent because when you remove patience, there's a byproduct of that, and that is removing forgiveness. And I think that it's important because we judge people or things on a single moment in time. We judge family members. During the pandemic, because everybody was on social media. They didn't have anything to do. I saw friends that were lifelong friends, and then they would find out, say, a political affiliation, and then they were mortal enemies. Up until that point in our lives, we never really, we might. I had friends. I knew their politics. They were opposite of mine, but we were friends. And so the purpose or the driver of a byproduct of social media is it's removing forgiveness and removing patience and forgiveness. And I think we need that in society. I think that's why we can't communicate is we don't have forgiveness
Right.
and
Human empathy.
empathy. Yeah.
Well, if you have forgiveness and empathy, then you actually have to make room for other ideas that you might disagree with, and you actually have to be maybe disappointed, but live in a world in which we're all a little bit disappointed, but we're all a little bit happier because we live in a more homogenized world. But today, we are delusioned to think that what we're presented by social media could actually become reality. I have news for you guys. almost everything that you see in your feeds will never happen. No, because you're missing 50% of the story. So we
Agreed.
need the 50%. You have to go outside of your device to find that side of the world, that other side. And we want to speak to you. I know I do. I want to speak to anyone who's willing to step out of their comfort zone and say, Mark, I'm lonely. I'm tired of yelling. How can we make this place better? So when you're asking what really is the biggest problem with social media, is it makes us forget how loving and caring we can be. And so when I told you the statistics are that most people today are more depressed, that's tragic when we're supposed to be more connected, to Kim's point. We could be more connected, but then again, by us being more connected, then what would we be yelling at? And then how do the social media companies make money if they can't and couldn't keep us in our echo chambers? It's
Yeah.
very, very cynical.
Mark, you brought
Making
something up,
us
I think,
yell.
on the our last show. You brought something up. I think you were comparing TikTok in America versus TikTok in China, the content and how it impacted society, and that everything in China on TikTok, on their version, was very positive. It was a very and they have a higher level of national pride. Their children are they're focusing on skill sets at an earlier age. A lot of positive reinforced stuff. But in our world, it's more divisive.
So let me tell you what I did. I've actually gone out and Kim, I did this on Dan's show. We got into the TikTok BAM, and basically we had some very passionate comments about people really caring about the fact that they don't want to lose TikTok, and they wanted to know my opinion of that. And so I don't think they were expecting Mark's opinion. I went, well, it's simple. If TikTok stays the way it is today, I'd like it closed down as fast as we can close it down. But in America today, we have an amazing opportunity. And guess what, guys? We have the power. It's not them. I don't want to hear them anymore. I'm so tired of hearing about them, the mythical them, it, they. No, it's us. And right now, the people, because Biden has signed into legislation that TikTok has to be sold to an American company and entity in 8 months. Guess what, guys? When this thing's sold and when it's being discussed, why can't one of the stipulations be now that they also have to improve the algorithm to be more like the algorithm in China, and it only highlights positivity in America? Why can't we bring TikTok back now and make it absolutely the very best app in America? You can still have your same TikTok guys, the same stuff that you love on TikTok, but also have TikTok's algorithm always ferret out the best videos that are happy, that actually highlight happy stories, that highlight math competitions and kids that have exceptional skills. And by the way, for people who don't believe exceptionalism is important because exceptionalism creates a bias, I have news for you. This camera, the technologies I'm using to actually communicate with you on did not occur through mediocrity. These technologies occurred because we need brilliant people of all ethnicities to come forward. But those brilliant people need to be highlighted. They need to be honored. And we are getting into a new era where we're trying to say that you can be a mediocre scientist and still and create the next big thing. And I have news for everyone. No, no. We need to be elevating the bar and forcing everyone's standard to the very highest standard possible, just as the algorithm does for TikTok in China. And that would allow our culture to actually highlight not just the very best of an individual, but the best of the culture. And that then makes us all happier because we're living in a culture we like. Just think about that. if social media was making you feel that the country you lived in was a nice country? These are the steps I want to see. So I'm putting it all on us. TikTok's our responsibility. Biden's given us an opportunity to take it back. I'm asking you, Americans, are you going to take TikTok back and change the algorithm to be sympathetic towards the very best activities in our society? Or are you going to maintain the same algorithm that's not sympathetic to our society, that degrades our society, and it makes money because it does that? Which version of TikTok do you want?
Mm, that's powerful. I love that. I really appreciate your perspectives because they're so balanced and you're also willing to say things that not a lot of people are talking about. And it's a more holistic perspective. And honestly, reading your book answered a lot of these questions for me and opened my eyes to a lot of things that I hadn't considered previously. So, for those who haven't read it yet, it's called Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity. There's a lot of really interesting concepts, but there's also a lot of solutions and practical tips that people could implement. So I highly recommend it. It's a great read. But one of the concepts you talk about is, for example, you told a story about your son and you being a technologist implementing some of the most high tech safeguards that are probably more advanced than any of us could come up with, and how your son at that time was able to circumvent those safeguards that you had implemented. So there's the concept of what we can do to safeguard ourselves, like, for example, apps and tech and VPNs and things. But then there's our personal responsibility to use our own brain and not rely on these things. And the other one was that regardless of the discipline or our own, the things we can do to improve our mental health and our safeguards and our boundaries, we can't compete with these thousands of programmers that various platforms employ to keep us on their platforms, to delight us and entertain us on these platforms with content we may have never otherwise encountered, but that they feed to us and that they guide us through this train of thought. So it's very difficult to compete with that from a discipline standpoint. So I want you to explain a little bit more about that conceptually, and also what are the solutions?
Well, we are never going to compete as in the individual or the family against the programmers that are trying to delight us, because they know more about us than we know about them. And of course, that makes sense because they're mining our data all the time. But what I mean by that, more or less, is that we tend to think that we're in control of our families, we're in control of the information coming into our households, and we can actually protect our household. Well, first of all, children, for example, leave your house and go to school, and therefore if you have your devices all locked down, they're going to be exposed to devices that aren't locked down, and therefore they're going to get exposed. So I want parents to realize that I'm not suggesting willpower is the end all be it all, but it's the beginning thread by which you want to build the young minds and young people to actually rely on their willpower, because now you're creating kids that are tough. Now, I understand that willpower is not the only thing we have to do. There are tons of apps, as we were talking previously about, that you can use. And so, for example, um, the kind of app that I would like to use is I like to use tracking apps that have accountability partners, and that every 2 weeks or every month, it doesn't really matter, whatever your cadence you want to make, depending on how bad the problem that you're trying to solve for is, you become an accountability partner for your kids. Now, this is so important. When a parent goes to a child and says, listen, I'm worried about you and social media, and then a child watches the parent on social media right after they've had this lecture, the the parent might not realize this, but the kid loses respect for the parent because the kid thinks the parent's very hypocritical. But what if that parent went to the kid and said, listen, I struggle with social media just like you. Will you mind becoming my accountability partner? I want you to see my device every 2 weeks, and we're going to discuss what I'm watching, and will you discuss what you're watching, and we'll be accountability partners to each other because I'm having the same struggles you are. If you're a man, guys, just admit that you're having struggles with porn if that's your issue. Just admit it, especially to your son or even to your daughter, because they need to know in the real world these things really exist. Well, you know what's neat? There'll be nothing more personal for a parent to realize that their kid will be watching their habits. And at the same time, there's nothing more personal for the kid to realize they're monitoring their parent. And at the same time, with that power, they actually probably will not do all the bad things they were doing. Why? Because accountability creates a responsibility, and responsibility creates a different type of dopamine. There's such a thing as a dopamine of accomplishment when you feel really good in that 2 week period when you go and do that checkup and you're able to say to your mom and dad, hey, you guys were good and I was good too. You feel good about that. And that's how we should feel. And that's how you create healthy relationships with families. You know what's missing in American families? Accountability. So I hope you guys see, to me, this fixes a lot of problems.
Mm, love that. And it's so real. It's interesting because a lot of people want the quick fix. And even when it comes to our own mind, we're like, what app can I use? I know I even asked
What
that,
app? Yeah.
right? But it's like, well, your mind, the thing you're programmed with, that you should actually be programming against that type of distraction. So definitely not here to say it's easy or it's always pretty. And again, especially on my day off, I have no problem. I love not picking up my phone. Like that is great to me. But because I work on social media, it's very difficult to not be distracted by the things they distract you with. So there's always a balance and there's always a solution somewhere in the middle, especially if people have a hard time making a huge jump from 1 to 10. I love your approach of start somewhere and be practical about it, right? So back to the mental health concerns and impact of social media, what do you think some of the most promising solutions or approaches for addressing tech related mental health challenges, especially in the younger generation today that are so greatly affected by it?
Um, Kids have forgotten how to concentrate because the devices titillate them so much, excite them, that when they get into a dry textbook where they actually have to learn something that has no titillation in it and no fun, they don't know how to do that anymore. It's a lost skill. We have got to stop thinking that textbooks need to be entertaining. We're trying to make now textbooks that are actually less meaningful because we're trying to make them appeal to the younger generation. What are we doing? This younger generation can't pass programming tests to work at my company. Okay. I mean, I want to honor you with a job. You have to be able to pass the minimum requirements. So, what do I want to do here? Give you a textbook that makes you feel good? Do I want to give you a textbook that teaches you the skills so you can get an incredible job that then you get to watch your work on television? What do you want? Goes back to exceptionalism. So, to answer the question completely straight up, is if we want our kids to concentrate, then we have to teach them how to concentrate all over again. And one thing, that first piece of advice, you need to become an accountability partner. Second piece of advice, you put a tracking tool on the youngster's phone, and you don't just track them, you want them to track themselves. So when they come to you and get the report, you want them to give you the report, not you go onto their device and say, look at what you did. No, you want them to come to you and accurately tell you, hey, mom, dad, I spent 16 hours in YouTube and 22 hours in Fortnite. Yeah, I guess that's a lot, mom and dad. 22 hours. Wow. I had no idea. Wow. Yeah, well, son, with 22 hours a fortnight, we could have gone out and done daddy and donut time, and we could have had probably 150 donuts. Yeah, you've missed out. I mean, the point is, we could have also gone out to a movie together, or we could have gone out in the car and enjoyed some family time. But we've missed all that for that hours you have on whatever it is. When we don't create accountability, we never create the conversations that allow these natural consequences to be understood. So our kids don't see natural consequences because we're never having the discussion, because we're always on the edge. So we're saying, get away from that. Don't do that. But what's better, guys, is let them use it and talk about the consequence of what they've done. Teach them what they've given up by actually using the tool. Do you guys understand? This takes a little bit more effort, but this consequence is way better because the kids will come around to logic. They will. I promise you. Every kid does. Even if they store them off and you'll see them for 5 years. I had one that like that. They'll come back. But you cannot leave your life in hypocrisy by not amending your ways and asking your kids to amend theirs. So you have to deal with your own social media addictions first and dependencies. And I think by saying, listen, I need to work on this just as hard as you do, really levels the playing field, because you're not saying you're better than your kids. And I believe that will help America. That single piece of advice I just said is probably the strongest piece of advice I can get of helping our kids against this influx of what I'm just going to say is useless information that doesn't help them whatsoever and only titillates them, but doesn't give them any benefit to their lives.
Oof, that's so important. There's so much more to unpack. I'd love to have you maybe on another episode, because there's the physical impact, which is a whole conversation there. And there's many different ways that it can affect mental health, relationships, and our society at large. And as a technologist, as we all know, technology emerges so rapidly. It's completely different within 6 months. So from everything you've seen, how do you see technology evolving in relation to our mental health? Do you think it'll be inherently positive or mostly negative?
Can I hold on here? I need to go and let the maids in, and I'll be right back. I need to take a 3-minute break, and
No.
then why don't we just start this
Well,
question over? Can we do
well,
that?
I can jump in here while you two take care of that. I just wanted
Let me go
to,
take care of that.
I want to kind of talk about what Mark just shared as an option. And one thing that I tell people, if I were to put when I played football, I played all the way through college, there were always these sayings on the wall, you know. And so if I were a coach today, I would put on the wall the word discipline with the following definition of discipline: to do the things I need to do before I do the things I want to do. And I think this is important to understand, because if you really want to improve your life, and I'll give you a great example with your kids, them reading a book. If a child reads a book versus watches a TV show on a tablet, their frontal lobe of their brain, where their logic chip, their dopamine is in the back part of the brain. The brain, as it develops when they're born, it starts from the back and it goes forward. But reading a book gives them that discipline, because what do we get when we read a book? When you're reading a book, you're having to formulate the story in your brain. You're literally creating the environment, the setting. I'll never forget whenever the movie Lord of the Rings came out, that Gollum, he looked and sounded identical to what I thought about as a kid when I read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings books. I mean, it just freaked me out, because that's how my whole life had imagined this character. And so I found it very intriguing that I created this world that in my brain, but that took patience, that took time, and that took development, because you're doing logical work in your brain whenever you're reading that story. And so I challenge those that, as Mark was saying, to get people off of social media, supplement it with reading. find a good book. And I'm currently reading a book now that Jack Sacco, which is a friend of ours, he wrote. It's Where the Birds Don't Sing, and it's about World War II. His grandfather was he stormed the beaches of Normandy, and he was there when Patton gave his famous speech. And it's a very interesting book. It was compared to Saving Private Ryan by critics. It's a very well written book. And I have several other books lined up. And reading to me is kind of a blessing and a curse. I love to do it. I just have very little time to do it in because I'm constantly moving. I'm like a shark. I'm moving. But I do find that to implement the discipline in your life to do what Mark is recommending, if you offset it by reading, or a side hustle. But I like to think, find a good book because it'll start developing that logic chip, which is in front of your brain, helps you process information better. And it slows you down. I find reading and sometimes we need to slow down because we're moving at the speed of light with all of our technology. And for me, sometimes I'll go sit on the porch barefoot with the dogs and just chill because I need quiet so I can think.
Yeah, like a detox from all the overstimulation. Absolutely. I mean, it's one of my concerns with this younger generation, including my own generation, but specifically the kids that are being raised in this age where all they know is the influence of social media, technology, influencers. And to your point, they mimic that behavior and they know not much different. So, my question for Mark as a technologist, with all the emerging technology that you see, do you see efforts to improve our relationship with our mental health and technology, or do you think it will become more difficult for us?
I think we're only now starting to realize the damage that we are doing. This is similar to when we did nuclear weapons. It took us around 10 years to actually appreciate the ramification that nuclear weapons had on society. It was subtle at first, the idea of we could be wiped out within 20 minutes or 30 minutes of, in the 50s when the sirens went. And today it would be a matter of seconds and minutes. But what's happened is well, that's a perfect example, actually. I love that analogy. So in the 50s, an ICBM missile from Russia or even from a submarine we had about a 20-minute to 15-minute warning. But today we have hypersonic missiles that could be lobbed off of a submarine and could actually hit us within 3 minutes. So these time frames are getting diluted. And when these time frames shrink and they change and society seems to be accelerating, it's interesting how the doomsday clock was at 10 minutes to midnight, and now we're at 3 minutes to midnight, I think. I'm not sure what it is today, but I'm going to look that up as we're going through where the doomsday clock is at this exact moment. But it's really like close to being, I mean, it's literally close to like we're going to nuclear war. Just one second.
So true how quickly things develop and how little foresight seems to be implemented into these emerging innovations and how it impacts people.
Is it
It's
90 seconds to midnight?
Yeah, I think it's 90 seconds right now.
Yeah.
Right, it's at 90 seconds.
Yeah.
90 seconds, guys. So this is the deal. Why is that important? Because it means that we are cutting down the ability for society to make a decision should anything go wrong. We used to have a whole 20 minutes to try to do some diplomacy. We now have 90 seconds. And I want you to think about that because the doomsday clock is a little bit different. It's not really about the time, but that metaphor is actually really correct because you now have hypersonic missiles. So you could have the Russians could have a submarine very close to the East Coast, 200 miles off, which is legal. And they could lob a missile with hypersonic. It would hit us in less than 90 seconds. So Why is this important? Because we as a society tend to disregard something until it becomes adamantly obvious that it's going to do us harm. So, right now, to answer the question, we are just at the moment when we're waking up to the fact that we have just exploded the biggest nuke above our heads called AI. And that nuke now is starting to take our jobs. And then we suddenly realized that we didn't even put pornography precautions into AI because we wanted the algorithms to be pure. So we didn't want to infest rules into the algorithms as the AI was building. But what is the predominant image characteristics? I mean, what's the predominant image archive on the World Wide Web? What is the number one source of generation of imagery other than people's imagery that they create in their lives? That's pornography. So, what is the number one thing that the AI is scraping when it's looking at the World Wide Web, other than people's imagery that they create on their personal sites? It's not movies, guys. It's not the movie industry. That's teeny. It's the pornography industry. And so, when we then go, why is AI creating salacious pornography and its imagery and everything's so hyperly sexualized? It's because the amount of imagery that was sexualized that it's actually rummaged through is higher than you would think. And this is what's so funny about all this is that we then wonder why we have this result that suddenly Gemini comes through and the search terms were completely changed. This is the Google AI that was considered woke because when it came out and at the press conference, people started asking it to do searches on historical figures, and it made all the historical figures some ethnic minority, but not white. And it turns out that the diversity team in search at Google created a layer of search in which they made sure that every search term went through the search filter and everything was changed and shifted to diversity. So it said instead of saying do a historic search for historic figures, it said do a historic search and show as diverse figures. See a slight change in the search and you get a totally different AI output. So the AI itself would be incapable of showing you anything but the truth. This is where this thing gets so amazing. So the truth, okay, the truth pissed the diversity people off at Google, so they created their own truth. I'm sorry, I've got to start laughing here because you start to laugh when you start to realize how insane this is. So
Right. And how
to the
manipulative.
diversity people at Google, the truth was not diverse enough, so they were going to taint it with their truth, and they didn't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah. We can't
Maybe I'm
underestimate how much responsibility these platforms have because of their influence on society. And like I'm saying, especially with young children who don't know the difference between reality and what they see on these screens, that's so much responsibility that these technology platforms hold when it comes to their influence on society and future generations. And you and I both know those decisions they are making are intentional. Those are very well thought out and discussed meetings and people involved to make those types of decisions. Am I wrong in assuming that there's no incompetence there? It's very intentional.
you don't spend billions of dollars on doing it incompetently most
Correct.
of the time. And I don't want you to want to hear the federal government is incompetent. It isn't. It's so funny. It is so funny. Let's take electric chargers. We're told by mandate that the Biden administration wants us to all be driving electric cars. Well, then how come have electric chargers not really substantially increased in 4 years if our mandate is in the next 4 to 10 years we actually will have to be driving electric cars? What's happened? And I'll tell you exactly what's happened. We, the people, have happened because we have all of these special interest groups that all disagree. Some people disagree that electric engines should exist. Some people believe the cobalt mining is terrible. Some people believe that electric engines are no better than ICE engines. That's, a petroleum engine versus an electric engine. And I can go on and on and on and on. And we debate this stuff until the cows come home. This is what I know. I know that we will never agree completely on what is an environmental policy that will make anyone or everyone happy. It will not happen. What I do know is electric cars are really fun to drive because I own one, but they are disappointing when it comes to range. What I want everyone to realize is so you can't get everything you want. So electric cars come with a whole bunch of compromises. But then again, if you want to live in this world with me, then you're going to have to compromise a little bit to live with me. Just as if I wanted to live close to Kim, I'd have to compromise to live with her. And it's true. If I was to be in a relationship with Kim, it would be 100%. I would actually have to compromise and I would have to yield to certain things that were valuable to her. And the same to you, Forrest. And what we have lost this capacity to realize is what makes a relationship work makes the country work. And we've got to start having those very deep conversations again and stop when it gets difficult personalizing the discussion. Instead, when it gets difficult, start to realize, well, this is why this discussion needs to occur. And we need to be nice about it because both sides don't have the answers. And if anyone thinks today I'm coming off on my high horse saying, I know all the answers, I hope it's very abundantly clear. I don't have the answers. I believe we have left the harbor without the answers in place. And unfortunately, we're going to have to discover them now after the fact. And by the way, I'm one of the guys that was oblivious to this and I helped the ship leave the port. I'm not here to be morally right, but we've got to get real with this. We can change America, like TikTok. Are we going to complain about the American version of TikTok that occurs in 9 months? Are we going to say, we didn't get rid of TikTok, it's not banned, it's the same thing? If it's the same thing, then it's we, the people, that chose it to be the same thing. Then going back to the personal family stuff, if you really want your kids to grow up and to be able to be the very best citizens they can be, they're going to have to learn how to fight for what they believe in. And you're going to have to learn how to compromise and to have good debates with them. And you go, both the family and the child will have to learn how to actually compromise to make the family work, meaning everyone will be a little pissed off. But if you do it correctly, there will be something for everyone in that family. Why is this important? Because if we can start fixing the families, we can start fixing our government. We have to stop yelling at each other. And remember, your feed is your bias. You designed it, you made it happen, you told the algorithms what you like, they're feeding you what you like. Why does your like have to be my like? It doesn't. Get over yourself if you're worried about you not being respected. It has nothing to do with that. I just don't like what you like. Now, can we get along? I'm not a bad person. I just don't like what you like. What do
Right.
you have to say about that, Kim?
Yeah. Can we agree that everyone is entitled to their own opinion and it doesn't necessarily have to affect yours, or that you could still be friends and even family with people who may disagree with you, and that's okay? I saw an interesting meme or quote about we were told not to discuss religion and politics. So now people don't know how to discuss religion and politics and disagree respectfully about things that we're allowed to disagree about. Ultimately, there's a big difference between opinions that don't always require a response or an action and the objective truth. And I think what's important to really retain as a society is our concept, our grasp, our acceptance of what is objective truth and what is an opinion or something that we can make our own assumptions about. There's a big difference there. And of course, it becomes dangerous when people start selecting the truth they want to acknowledge and discarding the truth that disagrees with their narrative or that pisses them off, especially when it divides us, we the people, especially when it causes us to blame each other and point the finger at each other, and especially when there's a mental health crisis and people are absorbed with their own anxiety and depression and things that keep us separated and polarized. So I love the
Correct.
conversation of coming together for solutions. We're not all going to get 100% of our way all the time, but we can compromise on things that we are able to compromise on. And there is such a thing as objective truth. You may not like it, you may not have to acknowledge it every day of your life, but your truth is not necessarily the same as the truth. And as long as we can all accept there are some objective truths, there are some morally sound things that as a society we have to fight to retain, not only culturally, but because it's important for our human dynamic and relationships and perspectives. So I appreciate everything about your message, and I look forward to unpacking more about this with you, Mark. There's so much more we could talk about regarding the impact and the domino effect of all the other symptoms that this can cause. But I want to give you the floor to close us out with your final message about mental health and whether it's anxiety and depression or other obstacles people are facing. What is your message to those people who may be dealing with mental health issues related to technology?
Technology does not have a soul. You do. And your relationship with technology is as personal as your relationship to your creator. We tend to underestimate what our needs are as a human being. And unfortunately, mobile devices tend to give us a false sense of security that we're being given the world and we're being told the truth. And we're not. In fact, statistically speaking, 70% of cell phone users at some point are going to be ripped off, or they're going to be hacked, or they're going to find out that who they're texting is not real. My question is, if 70% of people find out that the reality they think is real is not real, and that's the stuff that we know that's being reported, the question then becomes, what is real when you're dealing with a cell phone? And I would like to suggest that you always realize that the true happiness of human beings is when we put the phone down and we speak to each other, we touch each other, we hug each other. You go into nature. And I always love to use this analogy. We stumble over a log and then we hurt our little toe and it's aching a little bit. We still have to walk in nature. But have you ever noticed when you're in nature, you hurt your little toe and you got a little ache here, but you feel alive? You have the ache, but then you're looking around and then something distracts you. And the next thing you know, you've just cut your wrist over a branch that just was out there. And next thing you know, you come back and you're having a bug bite. And all these little natural afflictions are occurring. And you have no control over any of it because nature just is. And so when you're done with your work, all these random things have occurred to you. And what's so special about those random things is they've taught you how to be a human being because a human existence is random. When you're in your cell phone universe, there's nothing random in it. Everything in that universe has been designed to actually serve you. I hope that makes you very uneasy, because how is that totally artificial world going to teach you how to be human, how to be happy, and how to exist? It isn't. We have been falsely taught that the cell phone has all this knowledge on it. Unfortunately, since we're searching for the knowledge, it doesn't. It only has on it all the information we want it to serve us. That's not the world's information. That's not history. That's our bias. That's us. So, if you want to get real, put the phone down. Go and experience nature. Go and experience love. Go and experience touch. That will heal you. The cell phone will not. No app will heal you. No YouTube video will heal you. Human beings can heal you. Trees can heal you. Nature, the ocean, beauty, the mountains, that will heal you.
Oof, absolutely agree. I want to challenge everyone to go breathe outside today, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, whatever nature you have access to. 100% agree with Mark, where a lot of times this mood or this mental state we're in is often self-inflicted, and I don't mean that without empathy for people that are really struggling with real things, tangibly real things in life that are difficult. But taking that break to get off your devices and to go outside and get sunshine and fresh air, don't underestimate the power of connection. And nature can be a really healing tool, not only mentally, but also physically, to detox us from our devices. I would even challenge people, whether it's your day off or a day you pick each week, to see if you can withstand one day without your devices. Could you leave your phone? Could you lock it away? Could you not check your notifications or your emails? Could you survive, or how difficult would that be? Because that might be an interesting litmus test to see how addicted we really are. And I'm including myself, of course, in this message. It's not that it's easy, but it's important, not only for our mental health, but our physical well being as well. So, this show is about the mind body mastery. Mastery means we're born with what we need, but are we utilizing it? Are we relying on technology to guide us, or are we guiding our own thoughts and our mental state and our behavior and even our emotions? Are we letting technology affect us, or are we retaining the control we are supposed to have over our own mind and body and spirit? So, Mark, thank you so much. This has been a really interesting discussion, and I can't wait to have more of them with you. And Forrest, I know you have kids, and you have a lot of stories within this space as well. If you guys have a final message before we close it out today, I'll give you guys the floor to close us out.
Well, I'll say this. I don't claim to be an expert at anything, but I'm an observer. I really feel like I'm in this experiment, and I look around and I connect and I observe, and I'm constantly learning. And I like connecting to people like Mark and some of the other guests that we have, some of the other experts that we have in our team as well at Veterans for Child Rescue, because we talk about the human condition all the time. That's what we're constantly doing. We're trying to work the system so we can get people back to family values, protecting our kids, doing what we think is natural. And so I challenge people to be the same thing. Be an observer of life. Look around. Get off your phone. Look at how you learn. That's the only way you're going to learn how to be a better person, and how to have that discipline, like I was saying earlier, to do the things you need to do before you do the things you want to do. Social media devices, they get in the way of us being productive. They get in the way of us having that relationship where you're touching, hugging nature or people. So I like that message, Mark. That really resonates with me.
I've been trying to think about what is the message I can give everyone to help with social media addiction, the lack of ownership, the lack of digital rights. And what I realized is that it is the same problem that's created truth decay, the same problem that's created the political debate and yelling match that now is our landscape. It really comes down to technology has alienated us from dialogue. It's actually done exactly the opposite of what Kim said it was supposed to give us. It was advertised, it was going to bring us together. What it's done is it's shown us how divided we are. And instead of us realizing that we all have different views, yippee, this is how we're going to create the next best technology because you have to have different views to create, right? No, we're looking at that as a freaking negative. We take the differences of our culture in this society today and we don't augment it, we destroy it by through this deconstruction, by stating that ethnicity needs to stay in ethnic groups. Because if we try to mold ethnicity into an American culture, you're destroying the culture of the ethnicity. Well, I understand that to a certain extent, but since I am a product of history, then isn't the whole purpose of evolving, meaning that we are constantly going to be changing societies? And the melting pot concept is that you keep evolving your society. So the melting pot will evolve it anyway. That's where we're going. We're changing. And the change has always been happening. So I don't understand this concept of, but you guys have never changed. That is absolute bullcrap. When I was a youngster, the feelings about sex, homosexuality, and trans was completely different than what we are today. So don't tell me we're not changing. We're all changing. But what we are not giving each other credit for is we're all changing at different rates and we all have different things that we're changing and different things that are important to us. So instead of taking everything so hyperly sensitive, we start, we need to start honoring what's different about each other and start realizing that by honoring that, you're going to create the best solutions. So, parents, you're not going to understand what your kids like, but in you exploring what social media apps they are on, what things they like, you will be able to start teaching them what's important in your life because you will be able to finally give them lessons that you can equate to what is important to their life. And you will be effective. I know because we've seen how effective the book has already been. We've got now classrooms starting to teach it. And it warms my heart to see these lessons start to go into the mainstream because I'm not about a movement. I'm not creating a religion or anything. But for every youngster that I can actually prevent them losing their innocence, it's a win. I was asked by the head of Indian media, this is a true story, at a conference, the National Association of Broadcasters. He looks at my book in my hand and he goes, "What's that book?" And I said, I handed it up. He goes, "Wow." He said, "So who wrote that?" And I said, "Me." He goes, "Okay, so tell me about your book." He said, "That's a real downer. I don't think you're going to find a real audience for that." And I went, "Really?" I said, "Well, that's interesting because you are having a chat with me and you represent media." He goes, "Yes, actually, I do." I said, "So who are you?" And he goes, "Well, I'm the CEO of Indian Media. We have about 100 reporters underneath me, and I'm the largest media outfit in India." And I said, "So let me ask you this question. How many people do I have to help before this book is worth it?" With a beat, he looked at me and said, "You're ready. I wanted to feature you on Indian television." That's my point, guys. This isn't a popularity contest. This isn't about how many. This isn't about how big. This is about saving people. And I believe one is sufficient. What do you guys think?
I
That's
love
my ending statement.
I love that. I don't think we could have ended it better than that. This is all about helping people not only heal and master their mind and body and spirit, but for the purpose of being able to help others. So, Mark, I know you'll have an invaluable impact that affects not only our current culture, but generations to come. This message is so deeply needed. So, I appreciate everything you're doing. I have huge respect for your mission and your message, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. And I'm so grateful that you joined us here today on Defending Our Health. Thank you again for everything you've shared today. And I want to encourage people to go to markstross.com. That's Mark, STROSS.com. Check out the book Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity, because your family needs this information, especially as we continue seeing technology emerge and the impact it has on all of us. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We appreciate you, and join us next time on Defending Our Health.